Well, it's a great pleasure to welcome on Dashing Dan's Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loan to deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital, and they do Zoom as well. One of the great sports broadcasters of all time. I've been lucky enough to work with this man for a long time at the ABC, and he has called absolutely everything at a very high level, including, I think, one of the hardest sports you could possibly call, which is gridiron or NFL American football. He's called a few Super Bowls now, and he has earned the right and thoroughly deserved to be the Channel 9 commentator for the athletics at the Olympic Games, the host broadcaster. It is, of course, the incomparable Gerard Whateley. Gerard, really appreciate your time and a very busy time for you. Thanks for joining us.
Dan, it's very kind. It's lovely to be with you to talk a bit of sport and to focus in on the Olympics. What an exciting couple of weeks ahead.
I bet you can't wait.
Yeah, I can't. So I've had a long time to think about it, and it's the best research assignment I've done in years. And so I've totally immersed myself in it. I can't wait to get on the grounds. The Stade de France I haven't been to before, so it's one of the iconic stadiums of the world. And then the athletics world is, I just feel like it's been amplified like rarely before. There's an ambition within the sport. It's held by the athletes themselves, and then the formers, like somebody like Michael Johnson, they want to make this mainstream in a way that the NBA and the NFL is in America. And just watching the Diamond League on Saturday night, and there's 60,000 in London to see it. What a precursor that is to every session that we'll get in Paris.
You think they can make it as big a sport as Michael Johnson has said they want to make it?
I think they could. They can. This is sort of the big test, is the Netflix series makes them mainstream, and we've seen what that can do for Formula One and the like, and it was excellent. It amplifies a few of the big personalities, including Sha'Carri Richardson and Noah Lyles, and that's the way into American culture, and to pit the US against the Jamaicans in particular in a sprinting sphere. And then I think, so if they have a great games, and I think this has the potential to be a great track meet, and then what can they spin off the back of that? I don't think it's a great stretch to see a world where somewhere in the US in prime time there's a 100-meter sprint, winner take all, $1 million prize, that sort of thing. So I feel like we've had the age of prize fighting. I reckon we're about to enter the age of prize racing, and it seems to appeal to those who are doing it. And it's just so spectacular. I thought Netflix did a great job with Sprint to put it into the mainstream, to put it into the consciousness of sports fans who don't follow track and field. And so if they get the bump and then Paris is spectacular on the track, then yes, I think it could really open the world up.
So you're in favour of, in 2028, of athletics going first ahead of swimming, or are you still a traditionalist like I am, that swimming should be first before athletics because that's what we're used to?
Yes, probably. It's a bit jarring to hear it, but then you see why and what they're going to do at SoFi, so that's the best sports stadium I've ever been to, SoFi.
Yeah.
So can you imagine what it'll be like to put the pool in there with 40,000? So that's quite stunning. So I get why. I don't think it's the natural course of things. The track brings the Olympics to its climax, but the Americans have a way, is they'll make a big pop on day one, starting at the track and with all that they do. So no, I think the preference is the other way around, but for the sheer spectacle of what LA is going to try to do, I understand the concession.
The great Gerard Whateley, who will be broadcasting the athletics with Tamsyn Lewis, Michael Johnson, Dave Colbert for Channel 9 at the Olympic Games, has been good enough to join me on Dashing Down to Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans. Just before we look at all the research you've done and who you think might go well and how the opportunity came about, a great colleague of ours who we knew really well, and one of the great athletics commentators of all time from the ABC. And I didn't know that he was even ill till you told me, so I really appreciate getting the message, even though it was sad. David Thirsty Morrow passed away. Inspiration to us all, Gerard.
He was, Dan. He was a great man to work with. I feel like his character matched his voice. He was booming, he was enveloping, he was welcoming. To be in a room with him was a real experience from when we first started, and he was so well established. And the So I worked with him most closely, obviously, during spring carnivals and at Olympics. And he's been in my thoughts a lot because in Beijing, I shadowed Thirsty for half of the athletics program, and I was over his right shoulder when he called Usain Bolt to win the 100, which was the most audacious, spectacular thing that most of us had ever witnessed. And I remember in the aftermath, once everybody's broadcast had finished, the broadcasters of the world were all hugging each other for the sheer joy and camaraderie of having been lucky enough and privileged enough to call it. So, yeah, as he guided me through a lot there, which was a little bit of a down payment on what might be one day, and that day's now not too far away. So I'd been thinking about him a lot. The NRL had announced that they were putting him into their Hall of Fame, and I don't think many of us realised at that stage that he was really in his final weeks by then. But what a beautiful tribute. There's only a few broadcasters across the two codes that are in their halls of fame. So that gives you an idea of the esteem in which he was held. So, yeah, I've got actually just down here, I've got his racing binoculars that he
Really?
called so many years at Randwick and Rose Hill. And he gave them to me when I started to call Melbourne Cups for us at the ABC, and yeah, so these were his, and
Wow.
all the plumbing equipment that went with them to mount them to the benches he had done right through the years. So yeah, he's never far from me.
I always remember in 2012 when he called Australia battle a bit early on in those Olympic Games, and I think I called a couple of sailing gold. Drew called Anna Meares winning gold, and
Yeah.
he called Sally Pearson winning gold, all on the same day. As you know, Gerard, I couldn't keep up with those two gentlemen when they decided to have a night out. I think they had
Yes,
4 drinks in front of him one night, or that night, that Sally Pearson won gold. And I'm thinking, well, Sally's won the gold, but for Dave, it was like he won the gold. He was so excited, wasn't he?
So I think my favourite memory, Melbourne Commonwealth Games, I was doing something outside. I can't remember which event I was doing. And when Karen McCann got to the G at the peak of the marathon, there were a whole heap of us out in the parkland outside. Maybe I must have covered one of the legs, one of the portions when they were coming through. So I was out near St Kilda Road in the gardens there and had a radio, and just people gathered round to listen to his call as she entered the stadium. And that's a moment that resonates for all sorts of tragic reasons now, but it was a huge unifier during that games. And we lived that through his voice. And it's funny, was once you've lived it through the radio commentary, the television's never quite the same. Is it the theatre of the mind that he could so beautifully capture?
Gerard Whateley is with me for Dashing Gans Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans. Areas of expertise for Aussie Home Loans include purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment, plus first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans and personal loans. You touched on the radio. How different are you going to have to call some of the athletics events compared to radio, Gerard, as you won't have to paint the picture so much? Or do you just do what Dennis Committee used to do, calling footy, he called it the same way?
It's probably a question I'll best be able to answer in hindsight, Dan. So I've called a little bit of athletics for the radio, but not very much.
Hmm.
And so I've sort of spent the whole year thinking through a style and practicing whilst calling events on the telly. So it'll be a blend, I think. There's still that element of race calling to it. But yeah, as my main experience at games has been swimming on radio. So you paint the picture as thoroughly and completely as you can. Yeah, so I'm so looking forward to it on every front, and the challenge of it, and then how you end up doing it. I've got a plan, but you never quite know until you've done it, how it'll feel and what are little adjustments that you'll make along the way.
I think a long way out, Gerard, everyone was thinking, I wonder who's going to call the athletics for Channel 9. Were you even thinking that, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago, but before you knew that you might have been a chance of doing it? Were you thinking, I'd love to
No,
do it,
no.
but I haven't heard anything?
Yeah, so when the Olympics moved from 7 to 9, it's like everybody, you're going, oh, what does that mean for Bruce?
Yes.
And then you start to run that through from a radio perspective, as we'd had rights at SEN to Tokyo in partnership with Seven, but SEN and Nine's radio arms are competing arms. So I think we knew we weren't going to be part of it from a radio front. So I must confess, is from whenever that change was made, I just assumed that I wouldn't be at these games and wouldn't have a role to play. So, and there's a little, everybody would feel there's a little bit of a lament in that. Is I'd done Beijing, London, and Rio, and then all of Tokyo was done from Australia. So it's great to be immersed in, but it's just not the same. So the idea of Paris had been so alluring for a while, and then you go, oh, that's just not going to be my reality. So yeah, I'd made peace with the idea that I would be watching like everybody else, and then just doing the radio program the next morning, reacting to what had happened, rather than taking it in or being able to convey it myself.
And then you got a call from Brent Williams. Must have
Yeah.
been exciting, Gerard.
Yeah, it was. So they'd obviously asked Bruce if he could do it, and Seven hadn't given him the release on that front. And so I think it was either October or November last year, where we had lunch and the idea was floated, and I just assumed I wouldn't be able to do it either. I'm long term and absolutely loyal to SEN and Fox, and just couldn't see the world in which I'd be granted a release to go and call it for Nine. And in my heart, I'm thinking, oh, what a thing to be offered, but not to be able to do. And I remember sitting. So I did ask, but didn't expect the answer to be yes. And I remember Christmas Eve at the end of Carols by Candlelight, Channel 9 premiered their Land Down Under promo for the Olympics. And it was just so moving to watch it, and then to think, imagine if I do get to do this. Imagine if you could be there and I got to call the track. So it took a few months, and it's incredibly generous. I mean, basically my employers are loaning me out to go and fulfill a dream. And then there's a duty to Channel 9, who have invested so much in these games and have such a responsibility, and you've got this role. So it's a lot to think about. It's a lot to rationalize, and I allow myself to think about it only every now and then. It's much better to just draw it back to the nuts and bolts of what will be required on a certain day or night than to think of the overall. But it's an extraordinary honor. And I feel incredibly privileged in the days before I head off to do it.
You don't mind me asking, Gerard, was there a lot of haggling about, yeah, maybe, maybe not? Or once Channel 9 approached you, Hutchie at SEN and your employees at Fox were pretty good?
So it was just I just asked the question, and this is what it would look like, and this is how long I would be away for. And then it was really up to both to figure out whether they were prepared to have me absent during a key part of the footy season, um, to really fulfill my heart's desire. So that it is incredibly generous of them to do so with me. So no haggling, and it had to be sort of a full release. I'll do bits and pieces back to SEN each day, but to be able to do the job that I've been asked to do, I needed the freedom just to go and do it. So yeah, I'm so grateful, and because there's not really any motivation for either of them to let me do it, but they have, and yeah, so now it's my job to deliver against that.
Outside broadcasting big events, and you broadcast many of them, we'll get to them shortly for Dashing Downs Olympic Adventure for Aussie Home Loans with the great Gerard Whateley. Gerard, was that one of the most exciting moments when they said, both Fox and SEN said, yes, Gerard, you can do it, we'll organise things
Yes.
around you?
Yeah. So I'd started to watch 100-meter races through history, and just to make jottings, wondering whether it would amount to anything. But the more you thought about it, and the more you looked at it, you go, oh, just imagine if I'm the one who gets to do this. So yeah, it was terrific when I got the clearance, and I remember getting the phone call from Fox. It was straight after Vegas, actually, straight after the NRL executives and the TV networks had all been in Vegas together, and I think it sort of got nutted out to its final point there between Fox and Nine. And yeah, to get told was it was just thrilling. And it does, I mean, you've had the same experiences, that the things that you you grew up hoping to be able to do, and then once you're in the industry, is wondering whether you might get to. So same experiences. I might have, first Melbourne Cup, first grand final, all those sorts of things, and the sheer nerves and the terror that go with them, but the pure excitement of going, this is what I wanted to do when I was 10, and I'll get to sit there and do it. And I'm sure once it's done, and hopefully it goes well, is there'll be sort of that, oh wow, what a thing to be a part of.
Are you feeling nervous or
Yeah.
excited or both?
Everything. Yep. I feel everything. So I probably have just the smallest affinity with the athletes who have dedicated themselves for so long to it. And there's a natural nervousness, which I always think that the nervousness shows that you care. There's a degree of anxiety that goes with that. There's sheer excitement, and then there's the work. And I always think the work's the best part. So the past sort of 8 or 9 months has just been it's been brilliant to do, and then you're trying to bring all of that to life to do justice to those who are there, and then to bring all of that work to life. So yeah, I feel every emotion that there is, and I think about, I suppose you don't know until you're there, but when I take my seat in the Stade de France in our broadcast booth for the first time, and then on the night that you walk in for the 100, I've been there as an observer, but I haven't been there as a caller. Yeah, I imagine you wouldn't be human if you didn't feel a degree of nerves towards it.
Other erstwhile colleagues, I mean, Glenn Mitchell, he taught me to over-prepare. You've always said you've been an over-preparer. I like to think I've been an over-preparer. You just get so much information. It's been a labour of love, Gerard, though, hasn't it? I mean, it's not like studying for an
Yeah.
exam or a history or politics or physics or maths exam. It's not bad to be learning about the history of athletics.
Yeah, so I've had a working knowledge of athletics and engrossed at the Olympics, but not during the season. So from the moment the Diamond League started in March and all of those meetings to the European Championships, which were broadcast in full, so that was a great sort of rehearsal just to get the feel of it. So doing the day session after 360 when I'd come home at night, and then during the next day doing the night session between radio and TV. And it clashed with the Hall of Fame. So I got halfway through the European Championships. So if it was 6 days, I was up to day 4, and I just had to put it away for a week and tried to avoid everything that I could, and then came back to it a week later and just straight back into the immersion of 3-hour sessions and watching all the heats and doing the phantom calling and that sort of thing. So yeah, great project. And I do think the beauty of the modern era is just how much is available. So during the US trials, which NBC was broadcasting, you couldn't get a legal feed of it in Australia, but you could chase around YouTube, and feeds would pop up, and they would last for 40 minutes, and then they'd get taken down, and another one would pop up. One would pop up that had an obstruction in the middle of the screen. There was a big logo, but you could listen to it. You could see bits and pieces at the side of the screen. The funniest ones were clearly the Jamaican trials, which there was somebody in the stands with their phone filming each race and then putting it on Twitter. So a couple of minutes after it would arrive. And a bit like Lance Franklin's 1,000th goal, is there was a bald bloke sitting in front of this person who was doing all the filming, who would jump up with 60 to go in a race, and you'd get the it's been so interesting to grab whatever you can and watch it. So not just read about it. And that goes back in time. So I've watched everything from the cycle that runs, what does it run? Rio, London, Doha, Tokyo, Budapest, Eugene, Budapest. And so all those races are there, and they're almost all there in full. So being able to watch everybody's performances as well as read about them and see the times that tells you so much about the modern era of what you're able to access sort of legally and illegally. It's been fascinating.
Sure, Channel 9, I was a chance of going to one of the games for Channel 7, didn't quite get there, but they said when we were negotiating that you would have people as producers and researchers to help you. If Channel 9 offered you that, or are you more, if they have, are you just more content on doing it yourself? If it is to be, it's up to me, is an old saying of mine, Gerard.
Yes, and no, we've had a dedicated researcher who he and I have. I suspect we're very like-minded, Christian and I. So
Right.
we built a document from the start, and then sort of line by line of each race, each athlete, just adding in what they did where, pattern of racing, biographical material. And that's so I had a week off radio a couple of weeks ago and just did the line by line review of all of that. It took me the best part of sort of 4 days to get through. So yeah, it's I could reckon we could sell subscriptions to this little Bible. We love it, and everything that we've learnt and everything that we've wanted to know is there. And then I guess one of the things that you develop over time, everyone's got their own style, is once you get there, the race is out in front of you. It's not in that book. So everything in the lead up is in the book. But then once it's out there, is you sort of have absorbed what you want to absorb, but the race is the race. So yeah, I feel like I had a plan and I've done every skerrick of research that I wanted to get to. Christian and I put together a document that I will cherish, and then you get there and immerse yourself in the action. So yeah, I feel like I've got through everything that I wanted to do, and it's been super. As I say, the best research assignment I've done in years.
So you need to have a little bit of a rest now before, obviously, spend some time with Claire and the kids before you go. Is that the most important thing now? You feel, as you said, you're ready to go. You're confident in your ability, that you've done enough research. I mean, you won't have the fields until you get there, will you? Or the final?
No. Yeah, so the fields will come sort of the night before each day's racing. So that'll be the next cram. No, I must admit, every waking hour at the moment is just full of the last bits and pieces, because you've never done enough.
No.
You just want absolutely everything you can get your hands on. And now the international previews are starting to land. So Sports Illustrated's just published their tip for every medal, and a lot of the podcasts and the reading I've been doing, they're getting to their Olympic previews. So I'll have a cache of papers when I get on the plane to read when I'm there. But yeah, so no sense of a taper. I'll just go all the way through, and then I'll see the kids on the other side of it.
Can you ever do too much, Gerard, in regard to preparation?
Probably, but I feel like if I've given, I just feel like you want to give yourself the best chance, and the best chance is to do the work. And I've never feared the work. So I feel like every morning on radio, as long as I've had time to be ready to get to everything that I wanted to get to, I feel comfortable, and it gives you the best chance of delivering against that. So it just makes me more comfortable to have done as much as you possibly can do. It's probably not necessary, but it's the only way I know how to do it. And it'll just make me feel more comfortable if I've read the last of what I need to read on the bus on the way to the session. I'll just feel more comfortable. And you probably end up with a million things that you'll never get anywhere near on air, but just the fact that I know them will make me happy and content that I've got that somewhere in the recesses of my mind.
Esteemed broadcaster Gerard Whateley, who will be heading up Channel 9's athletics coverage at the Olympic Games. The Games, of course, starting in a few days' time, is with me for Dashing Down's Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans. They've got over 25 lenders on their panel. Do you think now that you've done one of the hardest sports to call, and done it brilliantly, by the way, Gerard, over the last 4 or 5 years or so, the NFL, the Super Bowl, that you could do anything?
No, probably not. As I think, in a way, this athletics program is everything. It's not just anything. It's everything. There's a 9-second race and a 2.5-hour race. So everything from the 100 to the marathon. So I imagine that will stretch everything that you've got in your skill set across such a diverse set. There's a certain level of similarity to preparing for the Super Bowl for the first time, is coming at something relatively cold, developing a strategy for the way that you want to do it, having a plan in mind and then going and doing it. So I recognized that it was a shorter runway. It was I had about 4 or 5 weeks ahead of the first Super Bowl, and this has been a much longer runway, but it demands a lot more. So, and those I've spoken to say it's like doing the grand final twice a day for 8 straight days. There's an intensity and immensity to each session, and there's a lot to absorb, and there's a lot to distill, and then there's a lot to convey, and they come at you quickly. So I've observed that, but I haven't done it, and I can relate that back to swimming. It happens in a hurry, so you need to have everything settled before you get there, because every 6 minutes there's a fresh race, and then we switch distances, and yeah. So I'll be the wiser for it in the aftermath, but I'm under no illusion. This is probably, in terms of degree of difficulty, this is probably as high as I've attempted so far.
100 metres is always seen as the big event. I had Glenn Mitchell on my program early days, Dashing Gans Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans, and he did say he still thinks the big event in athletics and almost in the Olympic Games is the men and women's 100 metres, the fastest people in the world. You said you've been doing some phantom calls. How many times do you think you'll be able to call the field? Once, twice? I suppose it depends how the race goes. That's probably pretty silly.
No, yeah. So the tick I've developed, Dan, is I
Yeah.
will watch a 100-meter race from anywhere, anytime, juniors, seniors, just to see how quickly you can see it. So you have to see the pattern as quickly as possible and then get them home. And so that's just training the eye more than anything else, is scanning the field, seeing who's up and back. Is Sha'Carri Richardson won the world championship from the outside lane, so they can come from anywhere. Marcel Jacobs was over in 2 when he won in Tokyo. So yeah, it's I feel like the trick is just to watch them and to see how quickly you can see it, and then latch on to those who are going to be in the finish. And then, like, you can go back and play with it yourself. Usain Bolt misses the start in Beijing, storms through, and he has the race won by the Olympic rings. He has it won by 70. He probably has it won by 60, and then call him home. Or you can end up with 4 or 5 in a frantic finish across the line where the eye can't see, and you get down to thousandths of seconds. So there's lots of possibilities for it. And I imagine there's nothing quite so terrifying as doing it, or as thrilling as doing it. So away we go.
So do you concentrate on the favourite? Like, let's say if Usain Bolt was in the race, you're looking at him at the start, you make sure you mention him first, or do you just wait and see what happens?
I think with Bolt,
Yeah.
it's sort of cheating with Bolt. It's a bit like the races that had like caviar in them. Those races revolved around him, and he was always slow off the blocks. So there's a couple that would beat him out, and then he would rise and balance, and then they would measure whether he stormed through, and he inevitably did. So, for the certainty of having Usain Bolt in the races, that this year, this season has been all over the place with the 100 early, and then Noah Lyles, who's the reigning world championship, sort of sorted himself out. But just when it looked like it would be Lyles's time, is the last man onto the scene is Keishane Thompson, who has run the fastest time in the world. He did that in the Jamaican trials. He's roared to the front of everybody's thinking. So he's not as seasoned as Lyles, but he's faster than him at the moment. Lyles just ran his PB in London. So I think there'll be, depending on how they all go through the rounds, there'll be the temptation to look at Lyles and Thompson together as a starting point. And then there's a lot of possibilities outside of that. Tobogo, Curley, Benarek. I don't know whether Jacobs, the defending champion, makes it or not. There's Oblique Seville's the second of the Jamaicans as well, who's beaten Lyles this season. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they frame up in the heats and the semis. But in prospect, there are 2 favourites and then a real thick amount of chances. And if something goes wrong with the favourites, then it's anyone's.
Do you learn the world records off by heart? You know me well enough to know that I couldn't remember my car keys. It would probably learn the world records off by heart because I'll be too worried about looking down at my paper. Do you do that, or you'll have it right at your tip if required, if you know it's going to be a world record or a national record or an Olympic record, etc.?
So that they'll flash. The easy answer to that is that they'll flash up. So as soon as the time is confirmed, it will have WR next to it. So it's an instantaneous piece of information. And they make sometimes you get a 1/1000th of a second adjustment from the first time that flashes to the official time. But yeah, so I'll have a lot in front of me, including like for the Australians, you want PBs and national records are the most important measures, I think. So you'll want those handy. But if they break the world record in the 100, the whole world will know at the same time, and it'll flash gaudily on the screen, and we'll all react as such.
Gerard Whateley's with me on Dashing Gans Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans. Their areas of expertise include refinancing, debt consolidation, and also cash out construction and car loans and personal loans. And they've got over 25 lenders on their panel. You've caught a lot of horse racing. You've caught a lot of big races. I always remember Bruce, and I interviewed Debbie Flintoff-King as part of my program earlier on. And of course, Bruce didn't quite get her winning in 1988. And I think he still shakes his head about that. Having caught a lot of horse racing, Gerard, will that help you if you get, particularly in the 100 metres or 200 or 400 metres, if they hit the line together, you'll be able to pick it?
It might. Yeah, a little bit depends on the angle that you get at the stadium. So I guess the easiest answer to that is if you've called for enough years from your box at Flemington, you get to learn the angle of it, and everyone's angle is a little bit different. We'll drop into that box, and the hundreds on night 2 for the men. So I'm not sure is the short answer. And some of the races we've been watching, when it gets to 1 or 2 thousandths of a second, it becomes about the lunge and which part of the torso gets the line first. So sometimes it's very difficult to split them because you don't actually know what you're splitting. So yeah, that will be really interesting to learn and to live through. And then sometimes I think, Dan, is you have to know when you can't see it. So just some finishes are too tight for the naked eye. So I think my feeling is don't impose yourself on those ones, because the drama is then in the next 10 seconds while we wait to find out. And I think so with Sally Pearson's wait was 24 seconds or something like that. She ran the race and then had to wait 20 or 30 seconds to find out whether she'd won it or not. Is that you almost don't want to spoil the tension of that piece either, because that's a part of the race. And I remember the Melbourne Cup that had Dunedin and Red Cadeau, and I reckon the judge sensed the theatre of it, and he just held the result back. And just the tension of going, so the race is finished and we still don't know, and we still don't know, and we still don't know. And we'd had a look at a replay before they posted the photo. But the theatre in that was immense while we just didn't know which way it had landed. So yeah, I think that there's a sense of you either see it or you don't. But then not to fear that the next layer of drama is in that, well, who's going to get this?
Well, that was the same with Debbie Flintoff-King. I mean, mind you, I still think it's one of the great calls. Don't think, not sure. It'll go down as one of the, Bruce has had many great calls, as you know, Gerard. He's one of the all-time greats. And I still thought it was a great call, as I said. But there was a long wait for that as well.
Oh, yeah. So I'm interested to know what the processes will be in Paris. Like how quickly are they going to build the sense of drama, or how instantaneously are they going to get results? I think Sally Pearson would tell you she would like the result quicker than what they were doing in her race. So technology gets better and better, and watching the Diamond Leagues is just to how many seconds you have to wait to get a result. But yeah, I think it adds to the folklore of it, particularly if it's true. If they is there anything in sport more thrilling when they hit the line together? So in a way, it's doing justice to that as well.
And 75 Australian athletes, which is fantastic. They've just done well in a recent Diamond League event. Jess Hull is seen as a big chance.
Yeah.
you mentioned this morning on your program when Nathan Buckley, I thought that was brilliant, was trying to compare AFL footballers with athletes. I thought it was fantastic the way he's interviewing you. And you talked about Claudia Hollingsworth, and reading that great article, how confident is she? Where Craig Monson,
Yeah.
the coach, has said, oh, well, you'll be right for LA and Brisbane. No, Craig, I'm going to Paris, and she's there. And we've got some good chances, haven't we? Especially in the middle
Yeah.
long distance events.
And we've got the makings of a team that's going to take us through LA, and the culmination of it will be Brisbane. So Claudia Hollingsworth's race is so interesting. That's the 800. It was quenelled by a pair of teenagers in Tokyo. So the favourite was so Athingmo has missed. She fell in the US trial. She was the gold medalist. And Keely Hodgkinson was the silver medalist from Great Britain. She will be the favourite for sure. But we've had two teenagers, Cornella at the last time it was run, and Hollingsworth comes at it as a teenager now, and she's got great ambitions and she's made great strides. So how exciting to see her first step in the Olympic sphere. I think Tori Lewis is the same. So Tori's in the 200. She beat Sha'Carri Richardson right at the start of the Diamond League season from an outside lane. She's Australia's fastest woman ever. She's going to have a great career. So I think she feels like making the semi-final would be the first big step for her. Jess Hull has now emerged as Australia's best medal chance. So she's a perennial in these big finals in the 1500, but she had a week on the Diamond League circuit where she mesmerizingly chased Faith Kipyegon to a world record and then set her own world record 5 days later in the 2K. And listening to the international media talk about how Jess is now soared in their estimation. So I think that's the best guide. It's not jingoism. This is how the world is viewing Jess Hull now. This is her time. She's ready. She's at the peak of her power. She's at the right age. She is in an event where Faith Kipyegon is the greatest ever, and she's attempting the Bolt feat to win the 3 golds in consecutive games. But she's just tested her 1,300 meters of the way. So she's the last individual event on the track. So Australia, we're going to go right through the program, counting down to Jess Hull at the end. So what a climax that is. And watching those 2 races is to feel like she's a medal chance. Ollie Hoare just won the mile race at the London Diamond League. He's the gold medalist from the Commonwealth Games in a proper race. So there's great depth in the men's 800, 1500, women's 800, 1500. So I can't wait to see how this team performs for what they do now and for what might light the way for the future. And that's just to mention a few, is the dedication it takes to get to this moment. And each layer has its own level of success, is to go well in a heat, to run a PB, to get a national record. It may or may not mean a semi-final. It may or may not mean a final, but just to do justice to the feats separate to just measuring in medals. I'm really excited to see them and to get to know their deeds. And it's been a privilege to learn their stories in the lead up.
As you said, Jess Hull's a big chance that she's not till the very end of the track events before the marathons. How do we ensure that we don't sort of put too much pressure on her? Or do you think that she'll know that there will be pressure on her because her form's been so good and you don't get too excited? You've just virtually said, okay, PB be great. If she gets a medal, fantastic. But if she doesn't, it's not the end of the world, is it?
No. So I hope I hope the Olympians feel that we're at their shoulders, not on their backs. So I thought Cadel Evans always had a great way of framing that. It's less about putting pressure on to get a result and more about the building up of hope. Is we hope for all our Olympians. I feel like it's a bit different to the way that we follow our footy teams, and well, it should be. So yeah, I think the only pressure Hull will feel will be her own now. She's lit the possibilities. She spoke about that in the world record run as the race was set up for her. It's the first time she'd had that experience. She absorbed the pressure. She wanted to feel it and she wanted to deliver against it, and she did. But imagine how, when you're on the start line for any of these races and it's the culmination of either 4 years' work or a lifetime's work, is you've got to be feeling it, don't you? You feel it in your own journey, without the overlay of whether there's the external pressure or not. So much of what happens at an Olympics is around handling the moment and delivering against that. I've probably seen that firsthand at the pool. As a couple of the Olympics we had in the pool, individual swimmers simply didn't live up to what they expected of themselves. They crumbled under the pressure of it and spoke about it subsequently. You want each athlete to soar against their own hopes and expectations, and then we get to enjoy that.
Do you think we're on the back of our men's hockey team too much? I mean, they keep winning medals, they keep making semi-finals. They've only won one gold, and they tend to dominate all the events in the lead up. Their record is still pretty good.
It is. I guess for a team like that, the culmination of it is gold. It's probably the difference between the Boomers and the Kookaburras. For the Boomers, bronze was the triumph. Any medal was the triumph, and that will be the same again. Nobody really is anticipating gold. As the Kookaburras do, they have established a level of international domination. You would love to see them parlay that into gold. So, yeah, maybe there is. You carry your lot, and your lot is determined by your own level of excellence, and then there's the hope of delivering against that. And Australia will expect a pile of gold medals to some degree, and then you have to make a contribution to that along the way. So, yeah, they probably carry more of that dynamic than most of the others.
Gerard Whateley is with me on Dashing Dan's Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans. He heads to Paris soon to lead the athletics coverage for Channel 9, the Australian host broadcaster. He'll have Tamsyn Lewis with me. I had Tamsyn on the show a few weeks ago. She knows her athletics. She loves to talk. I reckon you'd be a great dynamic. Have you had a chance to meet her and sit down with her?
Yes. So I know Tamsyn relatively well through the Olympic circuit previously. I'm so privileged to get to sit next to her, and she does. She knows them all. She knows each of them individually. She knows their backstory. She's brilliant at being able to convey that. So by the end of a broadcast, she makes you feel like you know our athletes. And my role in that setup is, and Dave Colbert's done such a great job with those field events for so long, is I won't trample on what they have established. I'll just go in and fill that role to call. So I can't wait. So for all that I've read and learned, I deliberately haven't asked Tamsyn to share her stories because I want to hear them for the first time live on air while we're looking at the athletes either during races or in preparation for it. So yeah, I'm so excited. Athletics has been so well served by Bruce, Tamsyn, and Dave. So hopefully I can just fit into that mix as and share that with everyone back home.
You're good mates with Bruce. Have you had a chance to have a chat to him? What's the best piece of advice you've had from the great man, Gerard, in the lead up to that?
So we have spoken about it. That's the one bit I'll keep private
Fair
for
enough.
the moment.
Fair enough, Gerard. No, I'm sorry I asked you, but
no, don't be sorry. He's always been very generous with me. So yeah, I'll keep that part of it private.
Absolutely. Now, can I ask you about the marathon? The women's marathon has been a little bit controversial, and I'm not sort of laughing. I'm sort of laughing nervously for Lisa Waitman. Do you think, and I've had Steve Monaghetti on the program, and he ratified the selection of the women's team, which didn't include Lisa Waitman, despite the fact she had a better time than Jess Tringove, or Jess Stenson, as she's now known, having just come back after the birth of her second child, and she ran really well, that we should have, in the lead up to the Olympic Games, maybe 20 of our best marathon runners in the men and the women's areas race against each other, and the top three make the team? Do you think that's the best way of doing it in future Olympic Games?
Yeah, I don't, but I don't want to put myself across as any authority on this. Australia doesn't. We don't have the dynamic and the depth to be able to do what we watch from the US. Where in some of those events in the US, the first 6 over the line would all make the final, but there's only 3 places. Is we don't have that. So salute to all of our marathon runners is that there were 6 who got the time. That's absolutely brilliant. And then you have to make a subjective call. But I actually think it would be counterproductive to make them all run a marathon against each other. Is in the qualifying periods that are set up, it's much better to allow each to choose their moment to go after their time, and then you have to trust your selectors. So I don't have an opinion either way, outside of clearly Jess's gold medal at the Commonwealth Games carried weight. And then once you're on the top step of a podium in a major race like that, I completely understand why that would hold sway. But yeah, um, the idea of runoffs works for swimming, because if you think about that 100 meters freestyle in the women's, is that's the same US dynamic. Is 5 of those women could have been on the blocks in the final, but that's just not how it. So the runoff there works, but that's not quite. I think it would be counterproductive for athletics. It would be hard to get the right time to stage it, and there's not quite the depth there, and you could accidentally miss out on one of your key performers. Whereas in swimming, if somebody gets supplanted, it's by a superior performer, likely for the games, not just in a singular moment.
It's going to be a fascinating race, isn't it? Because they've all got wonderful stories, our men and
Yeah.
women marathon runners. I mean, look at Sinead Diver at the age of 47. Look at Jen Gregson. She was a steeplechaser. She got badly injured at the last Olympic Games, went off, had a child, decided, oh, well, I'll become a marathon runner. And
Yeah.
of course, you got the story with Jess Stenson, as I say, not long ago, having a second child and coming back, running a marathon and being in the team and the men with Brett Robinson and Patrick Kiernan and Liam Adams, all magnificent performers in their own right as well.
Yeah, so Tiernan and Gregson were the two heartbreaking stories of Tokyo, weren't they? Is Tiernan rode the pace on the 10,000 and collapsed at the top of the straight, courageously dragged himself to the line, which was one of those lasting images from the games. And then Gregson tears her Achilles. And I remember we interviewed her the morning after. Her husband was doing, he was our man on the spot, and to share in the trauma of that at the time and everything that goes into it, and then being wheeled off the track in a wheelchair and taken for surgery in the aftermath. That's not the Olympic dream, is it? So it's beautiful to see them both in a different event. I mean, you've done it. I haven't run a marathon. Is the courage involved in it at any level, and then when you're prepared to put yourself out there at the Olympic level, these are the events where if you run 20 something, that is a monumental triumph. So just making sure that it's couched in the right way is, yes, the medalists will be hailed, but the Australian performers there's a tier of success in there. And I spoke to Jess. It was just a few weeks ago,
Yes.
and she was still breastfeeding. And you go, wow, like she is juggling a lot in the lead up to an Olympics. I sat with her dad at Gather Round. It must have been the Friday before she was going to race the marathon that she'd set herself up for to qualify, and there's going to be no coverage of it back in Australia. There was no stream that they knew of, so they sort of had people who they'd been in contact with who were going to provide information from around the course, and just the family joy when she was able to run the time that she did and to qualify. So yeah, that's true for all of them, and they're not all there. So yeah, brilliant stories, one and all, and hopefully, well, across 2 hours, we'll get to rejoice in those.
Well, I mean, Steve Monaghetti made the top 10 in 3 of his 4 marathons, and he finished 1992. He said, I wasn't in great shape, but through hell or high water, I was going to finish. So 48th wasn't a bad effort. I mean, 3 top 10
Yeah.
was a mighty effort. A top
Amazing.
10 by any of them would be magnificent, wouldn't it?
Yes. Oh, yes. That would equal any medal that was won if you were able to do that. And I think, I mean, it holds such a place with each other. I'm just trying to think which games it was, but I remember sitting in primary school in the library watching Rob De Castella run his marathon, Commonwealth Games, Olympic Games. So yeah, is the great ones are so admired here. So we'll just wait to see how great our performers are.
You've done just about everything. Do you have a favourite sporting event, or is that coming up in Paris that you've called?
That I've called. Well, I'm so spoiled to have been able to do what I've done. So the AFL, so I don't, there's no cultural cringe with me. The AFL Grand Final, the Melbourne Cup, and Boxing Day are just that they soar. There's an energy to those days. You always arrive with a sense of history that engulfs them. I could put the Australian Open men's final over time in the same category, having had the privilege to do those. Yeah, so you know when you get to the MCG on Grand Final day that you're going to witness and narrate moments that will last. And we're coming off a Grand Final that had so many of those flashpoints. And then what I get to do internationally is when you call a test match offshore, there's a certain grandeur to that which elevates it from what happens at home. Olympics are special. So I think my favorite broadcasting moment was Kyle Chalmers winning the 100 in the pool in Rio. And just it was an unlikely story. Jinx event for Australia, had been for a few generations at that stage. Teenager, very little known going in, does something in the semi-final that causes you to go, hello, there's something going on here. And then he's seventh at the halfway mark, and his dad's on the other side of the stadium, and he's having one thought, just don't finish last. And 25 seconds later, he storms through the middle of the pool and wins gold and becomes a household name. So that sort of encapsulated in all of that is the thrill of getting to share in a moment like that, seeing something that you know will last, and then sort of trying to meet that moment. So I feel like the Chalmers 100 in the pool in Rio, and then annually I get to go and call the Super Bowl. So I've always felt the only thing that would eclipse the Super Bowl would be the 100 meters at an Olympic Games, and that's what I'm about to go and do.
Well, it's going to be fantastic. Can't wait, Gerard, to watch you, to hear you, to listen to you. It's going to be a very special moment. I wish I could carry your bags, but I'm sure you can do that yourself. You can do most things yourself very well. It's been a great pleasure having the great Gerard Whateley on Dashing Down's Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans. We deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital. They do Zoom as well, which I've just done with Gerard. Areas of expertise include purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment, building a property portfolio, refinancing, debt consolidation, cash out, construction, pre-approvals, first home buyers, a lot. Equipment loans, car loans, personal loans, and they've got over 25 lenders on their panel. Before I let you go, have you met Michael Johnson yet, or you've just spoken to him, the great man?
No, I look forward to meeting him. I've been thinking through the Tribune there. So the Tribune's going to have everyone from Snoop Dogg to Michael Johnson. It'll be hard not to be absolutely starstruck there, Dan. So it's like, I hope I've got a decent few stories to tell when I get home.
And also a decent camera as well. You can take a few pictures for posterity. Gerard, it's been great catching up. All the very best. You'll go magnificently. Safe travelling, and maybe we'll catch up and find out how it all goes on Dashing Down to Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans when you return. Go well.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me as part of it.